So much has been said throughout the years about Paul Bosch's relationship with Gino Hernandez, that he was like a son to him. I'd like to know your perspective of what their relationship was like, and how did Gino's death affect Paul Bosch?
Well, I'd say their relationship over the years could be a little tumultuous. Is that the word?
Yes.
It was up and down. But yeah, Paul treated Gino very well. There were always the rumors. You really only know what you know, and there were always rumors swirling around the fact that is Paul Gino's dad. Really, only Paul and Gino's mom would know the truth of that. But unfortunately, I was there when the call came in of Gino's death, and he took it really hard. He took it really, really hard. In this business, you are faced with losing people a lot earlier than I think folks in other industries do, and people in general. And when a young man goes way too soon, that's a little hard to take. And Paul's relationship with Gino was kind of like a father-son, so it hit him hard. One of the few times that I ever saw Paul just outwardly emotionally down, because he was just such a positive man and always up and would always look for the good. I saw him angry, but that was one of the very few exceptions that I saw Paul really upset and sad.
And we're going to, like we usually do on this program, tear up the format here, because this brought something up. When you said in this industry, we're faced with losing people earlier than in a lot of businesses or lines of work or whatever the case may be, sports, whatever. That was a phenomenon that started, really the first wave was the mid to late 80s with the Gino Hernandezes and a few. It started then because you remember back in the 60s and 70s, every once in a while there'd be an automobile accident. There'd be a bad car because the guy spent so much time in the car. But in those days, guys not only wrestled until they were in their 50s and even older, but they lived longer. And then suddenly, was it the time period? Was it just those crazy 80s, or was it the fact that here guys suddenly there was an explosion? Guys always made big money in wrestling. Not everybody, but there were always guys in wrestling, back to Buddy Rogers and Strangler Lewis or whatever, making big money for the time. But all of a sudden there was an explosion of television, and there was an explosion of popularity, a youth movement. A lot of young wrestlers in the 50s, 60s said they didn't make a lot of money because you were in your 30s minimum before you got a main event spot. All of a sudden it started coming quicker. So what was it? Was it all those things? What was it that caused that wave that we're still kind of suffering the tail end of, where young guys would go so early?
I think it was a combination of things. I think it was possibly too much too soon, not knowing how to handle fame, not knowing how to navigate the waters. There were the introduction of cocaine to the United States, all of a sudden, or the popularity of it. And drugs became more prevalent in our society. The media glamorized it in a lot of ways. So guys that were making a lot of money, that were young, that were out partying, it was a tough life, they're going to partake. And you can just go back to just our society in general and see where the drug boom took off, the cocaine cowboy days of seeing celebrities and wrestlers and football players, baseball players, guys that all of a sudden are dropping dead a lot earlier, that maybe they couldn't handle it. But I think it was pretty much a combination of all of those things. You go from obscurity to not being able to go out of your house because everybody knows your name.
Yeah. And that was especially in Dallas, and I was there on the tail end of the boom, but still saw it, that everybody in Dallas, Texas, which was a city with a lot of money and a lot of temptation, and everybody knew the wrestlers. The TV show was everywhere. But then, we'll get into this a little bit later on, but maybe we'll get into it now. In the 60s and 70s, it wasn't about the bodies. It was about the performance. Then in the 80s, it became about the bodies, because, our Uncle Vince loves loved the bodies. And no, he didn't physically hold people down and force them to do steroids, but his hiring practices, the guys weren't stupid. They saw who was getting jobs and who wasn't, and they saw what they might have to do to get there. And steroids ended up, cocaine came and went, but we're still seeing the effects of steroids on guys because they felt they needed to do that regardless of how good a worker or promo they were to get a job making a lot of money.
Well, I think that what you see is not just the introduction, if you will, of steroids, because they were introduced. I mean, superstar Billy Graham goes back and talks about, in the 60s and the introduction of steroids into bodybuilding and Arnold Schwarzenegger and guys seeing that and doing it. I think what the word we're looking for is the abuse of them.